BOD and the BZZW. So BOD, they will be the attacker first on the map Hilong Field. And now it's the unit ban picked stage. Oh, they banned Haberdius and Milonos. And in the first game, ING they just banned a lot of shared units, so that also gave the OISU the disadvantage.
Something that I actually love here from BOD that I didn't actually expect at all is that BOD traditionally have really liked the Harbour City map. They've used it a lot. And them obviously choosing to ban it out here might be a sign of respect for BZZW, identifying that they might be a bit of a threat on that map. So let's take it to Huling, where we're going to beat you there, hopefully.
Yeah. But actually, BZZW, they are also really good at Hilong Field because I believe in yesterday's match, they won the game with YS in the map Hilong Field.
Yep.
So I believe they must be really practiced as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Being one of the staple maps, you'd kind of expect it to be the case that they're pretty well versed on most maps. But I feel like BZZW might be a team after your heart, after all, because obviously they do favor a lot of that cavalry, and using them on Huling is a good map for it.
And one fun fact about BOD, they're kind of a new team, but also a really veteran team because they kind of a branch team from CNC, so they have a lot of really professional players. So that will be also a challenge for the BZZW. BZZW, also a team from China's mainland.
Mm-hmm. And just speaking on BOD, obviously, talking to their expertise and obviously some lack of experience as well. I know, at least, I'm sure Legolas will correct me if I'm wrong about this, but if I remember correctly, the shot caller from BOD is actually quite new to shot calling in this kind of capacity. And he's made some really interesting calls that I've really loved seeing so far. We've seen some really interesting baits. We've seen chances where it looked like they were almost doomed because they didn't have the right units left, and he's kind of salvaged the situation with a smart call. Essentially, stuff like coming down the ladders just to go up the other side of them was a really interesting strategy that we haven't seen many teams at all use on those staircases at Harbour City. So it'll be cool to see what he has impact here.
Yeah, and it's kind of really fun to see because we have like so many times CBL and always a lot of teams they chose the Harbour City and Hilong Field and Wolfwood, but we always like got the chance to see so many new things and new strategies being developed in those maps. That's also kind of a really the joy part in CBL.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I've even mentioned I'd love to see in the future if it's possible, as well as randomized maps between the pool. I'd really like to see our teams adapt to maps on the fly when they obviously see bans and taking that to an extra extreme, which might not be to everybody's taste, but it sure is to mine. Would be an interesting new take on it. Pretty interesting as well to see here coming out of BZZW. They've identified that, hey, we're going to take out a lot of those carry units. They've banned out the Martel Law. They've banned out the Zircalian Militia to try to take out those kind of real important carry units. And BOD identifying that has guaranteed that those Siphonaris are coming through. The Flamethrowers obviously being one of the staple units of that map. Really instrumental for pushing onto the points on attacker side and really good for chokes on the defender side. So opens that unit up to a lot of possibilities here.
So for BOD, they still got the time to choose the last new unit they want to ban.
I actually almost wouldn't be surprised if they just leave that vacant here. A lot of teams have chosen to leave that last one vacant, obviously just saying, hey, we want as many options as we can get towards the end.
Yeah, because at this ground, so many ranged units and also infantries got banned at this moment. So maybe more options will be a better choice.
Yeah. Something that I'm always surprised to not see banned is the Hussars, because we see a lot of them being used on the side of BZZW. I feel like that might have been even a good little target band there. But if BOD are comfortable with what they've got here, I can't fault them for it. Something else that will be interesting to see as well is we haven't seen too much of this. We saw it a few times in the opening days of the elimination phase. We haven't actually seen many people successfully do the only base defense. That was a pretty relevant strategy from what I heard in scrims and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we haven't actually seen it used to good effect yet in the actual live games. So it'll be interesting to see if any kind of team tries to pull that out, see how it goes there.
And you know, just like you mentioned, the BOD, they have brought a lot of excitement and new things in this time CBL. And yesterday, I believe BOD, they just won the match against the SSR, the champion from our like Euro American servers. So you know, BOD, they must got really got something. And so for BZZW, they must be really cautious. And yeah, we're just really looking forward to the coming battles.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to see if they learned any kind of lessons from those close series with SSR, as they were very, very close every single time they faced. But they produced great matches, took it to a field battle a couple of times as well, which we love to see. I'm always a fan of fields.
Yeah.
So
field battles.
Hopefully there's more of that. Now, obviously, having a favor for Cav yourself, is that something you really like seeing as the field battles, or are you more of a siege enjoyer?
Actually, I prefer. I actually find that both two modes, they got different enjoyment, because in siege you always like find teams, they have like new strategies and that can bring you like excitement. But in field battles, it's kind of a different way of enjoyment, because we have seen so many amazing battles. Because the results just kind of changing in the last minute of the battle. So especially in last time CBL, I remember the team GNG and another Japanese team, they just had a really amazing fights in the field battles. So yeah, I actually enjoy both. But you know, especially for field battles, because we're kind of like not really often to see them. So I believe players they actually find the field battles also very fun.
Yeah, really fun to watch. I mean, something that I'd point to when it comes to those field battles is that with the traditional siege style of battles, you usually come in with a game plan ahead of time. You usually come in with an agenda. You try to force that, essentially. We see a lot of the good teams can adapt on the fly, but a lot more of the teams towards like the lower end of the bracket, without any disrespect, because obviously they're doing a fantastic job to get here in the first place.
Yeah.
But even those teams, they seem to have a very rigid game plan. Whereas when we see the field battles, it's a lot more open to flow. A lot more of them will have to change up the way they play, because it is so much more fast paced than the traditional siege is. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, so it's more like depending on teams' cooperation, not those rigid plans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we see, obviously, team coordination works a lot in sieges as well, but in field it's a completely different thing, because 1 second of losing your cohesion in field really can cost you that double point capture. When that happens, obviously, your base is open to being captured, or for them to just hold it on until the end of the game.
Yeah. You know, for Ecliptos, and I believe also a lot of teams, they participated in the CBL, and the most they practice is actually siege battles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's almost every single team practices mostly siege, because obviously the plan is, hey, we're going to take it to a quick 2-0. We're not going to make it go to a decisive kind of split decision between that field battle. We're just going to try to eliminate them. So whenever you see a team that isn't well rehearsed in field battle, you can kind of tell. So everybody has to kind of scatter it in through their practice. But BOD actually, speaking of, is one of the teams that gets credited a lot for their very, very inventive strategies when it comes to field. So
Yeah.
it's always fun to see them make it there.
Yeah, and actually we have seen a lot of like interesting stories happening in field battles because we have seen teams, they are not really practiced in the field battles, so the results of the field battles can always be really funny to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of scrambling, a lot
Yeah.
of disorganization usually compared to the other
Yeah.
alternatives. So it's always funny and fun to see when teams are going through that, how they try to battle through it. As we get into the second game here now, the first game now, starting between BOD and BZZW.
Yeah, the round one for BOD and the BZZW. The game is about to start. Okay, so for BOD, there will be the attacker first. Wow, and you see the hero lineup, a lot of pike heroes.
Something else that's interesting here is we see a lot of 5-4-2, obviously that meaning just bringing a gold unit, a purple unit, and a green tier unit.
Yeah.
BOD are one of the teams we've seen utilize the most amount of green units out of anybody. I was fixated there on the third member from BZZW for a second, as he had a full lineup of peasants and green javelins.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that he noticed that, which obviously he has now. But BOD has been one of those teams that really does utilize a lot of those green units. We can see there's the Corteliers, if I'm not mistaken. We see a lot of Pike Militia, knowing everybody, I feel like, knows that unit's one of the most staple units to teach new players to learn with because it's so effective with this veterancy line. But a completely different approach to the game that BOD seems to be bringing from most other teams when it comes to the unit composition.
Okay, so Kilon Field again. The BOD, the attacker first. Quite a typical start, going for the point A and B in the same time, trying to seek time opportunities.
Yeah, we see it quite often, especially with this almost exact number split with the 5 members from BOD on the side of B. Trying to probe for any kind of weakness, make sure that they're spotting it. You can see already up on those walls is a longbow player and a shortbow player just kind of plinking away at the units. You can see a couple of them are already died. That's really good value for how early on it is in the match.
Yeah, they're just really taking every opportunities.
Yeah. And as a melee player myself, I usually play heavy classes. It's almost a little bit blood boiling when you go through that experience yourself. I know that a lot of players, when they're trying to move their units, they just see the archers up on top of the wall. It almost kind of inspires you to try to charge up after them.
Yeah. Me also, as a glaive player, I kind of get jealous when, those ranged heroes, they got a chance to do some extra damage when the heroes are not really get close to the walls.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've been drilling, as many people know him, Rice or Rasace for quite a while about his musket play. Because I've always played traditionally melee classes, so it's always a funny point of contention between the two of us as well.
Okay, so the attacker, they are seeking opportunities near the point B.
BOD are taking a pretty slow approach here. They're just setting up their artillery, trying to probe for any kind of weaknesses. A lot of the time, this kind of artillery will be placed and used almost purely for scouting. You don't expect a whole lot of damage as you see these shots coming over. They're not really in a great position to do a lot of damage. What they can do is they can tell you exactly what's behind those walls, how many of them there are, where the artillery is. Really important info to relay onto your team captains.
Yeah.
Bit of a fight breaking out here over on the B flank as well on this breach. You see a Treb coming in, quite honestly missing a fair bit, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But a lot of cap coming through here as well to try to mop it up. Actually, a super interesting unit. Sorry, I didn't even spot this in the menu. Was the Janissary Huckbadiers as well over there. You can see them plinking away. That's a blue unit, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 195 leadership from memory. Could be wrong about that one. I haven't seen that unit used in a while. But it's a very hard-hitting unit. Fires quite quickly after it gets its buff, is setting up and standing still. And you saw it actually doing a fair bit of damage there. Considerable for the amount of leadership that is being brought. Obviously, we see a simultaneous attack going on at A as well. Just like we said, pretty slow. But now we can see a couple of units rushing forward, identifying that there's not a lot set up here and trying to punish it.
A walk in the park.
Oh, really nice move by the attacker. They just send one force to stop the reinforcement coming from the defender, while just starts to capturing the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming out of BOD, coming out of CNC, both teams obviously linked. You see a lot of players coming out with their dual blades, sneaking onto points, capturing them when they're not attended to.
Yeah.
I actually really liked what you mentioned, the task force being sent to B. Essentially just hid in that little alcove there, shored up that gatehouse and held out for as long as they could to try to pull as many people away from that A point as they could. And BZZW doing a great job of mopping this up though, as we can see a grape shot getting sent up here. This one's very punishing if you can't handle it. I'm not actually sure if they can shell it with anything except for that blue mortar back there. It's going to get a lot of damage done if it's just left to do its own will.
Yeah, you see like several heroes from BOD side trying to destroy the grid shops by the defender.
It's absolutely the right call. Making sure that those grape shots aren't firing is the most important job you can have for most of the classes in the game.
Also send a champ. Also send a champ.
Great play there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was about to say, great play there also from the dual blades tying up that unit, trying to dive the artillery. It almost actually transferred into a kill there. Unfortunate for him that it did. Very scrappy fight going on right now. Could go either way at this point. We see a lot of cav flooding in from both sides from BOD, a really good flank actually.
Yeah.
But now they're kind of caught in this choke a little bit, where you see BZZW being a bit cheeky, using the artillery of BOD against them, jumping on those grape shots behind them, firing into their backs, and being a threat.
A walk in the park.
And you see those coverage from BOD. They actually could have like charged with split damage, but really smart and nice by the defender. They just kind of like narrowed them down, so they can't really have an open terrain to attack and do the charge. So also BZZW, they nailed this wave of defense.
Yeah, it seems like BZZW are very well practiced on this map at how to control these chokes. They're setting up a lot of units of halberds, like we talked about multiple times at this point. And they're guarding them with those loyal guards. I even saw an Imperial Spear Guard there as well. Really tanky units to try to tank a bit of the brunt of the damage. So the halberds can come through with that stun, with that multiple hits, and really chunk through that cavalry.
And then you can see the units they left for the BOD. They only have 24 high tier units left when the defender side they got like over 100, and the time is limited to 1 minute, so it's kind of difficult and tricky for BOD to take down the following points. Wow, really nice charge by the defender side.
Yeah, absolutely playing through what's mainly just green units there for the most part, getting into those Shenji, which are the most important unit on the battlefield for them to shut down. They've done a great job of doing that.
Yeah. Really nice cooperation by those ranged units and cavalries.
looking a little bit rough here from BOD, but something they've done well is they've identified, hey, listen, we're really struggling here. We're going to place down as much artillery as we can as they're down to only 10 now remaining. You can see it might not be enough to tip the scales in their favour.
Child's play.
Oh, really pity for BOD. Got kicked out outside of the city again.
Child's play.
And something I'm seeing coming out of a lot of these Chinese mainland teams is we see a lot of monastic knights, something that we don't
Yeah.
really ever see in the Asian servers. It's a unit that's pretty well held in regard of being a lot of people's favorite looking unit,
Yeah.
but not their favorite performing. But it seems like these teams really are able to utilize them well.
So congrats to BZZW. They won the first game against the BOD. So the MVP from BZZW is Lai. Got 3 kills. Wow, and a lot of damage to the enemy's units. Killed over 100 troops.
Yeah, great performance coming out from him. A lot of those are the halberds, the most important unit that we've talked about so
Yeah.
much, the most instrumental unit, shutting down a lot of that cav. So him neutralizing them really did allow them to hold on to that point, make sure that their cavalry was being a lot more effective than the side of BOD.
Yeah.
Okay. And on the side of BOD, obviously we have a pretty stellar performance from their top performer here, having the 1,000 points of leadership damage, which is pretty impressive, almost 1,100.
Wow. Yeah.
Especially in obviously the losing side of that exchange is quite impressive to perform as well as he did. He shut down 20 of those Shenji, shut down a lot of the Fortebraccio, a lot of those halberds, and a lot of
Wow.
loyals.
Wow, that's a great contribution to the whole team and a huge damage to the opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. A stellar performance from him. It's hard to perform that like that when you're on the losing side,
Yeah.
let alone the winning side. So props to him for performing as well as he did.
Wow, so the previous game is kind of unexpected. So BZZW, they won the first round against the BOD. BOD is kind of like a branch team correlated with CNC. So, but they also did a quite amazing job against SSR yesterday. So I believe they got a chance to fight back in the next match.
Yeah, absolutely. With the unit bans that have come through as
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that a third game is needed on that field battle that we're both
Yeah.
hoping for secretly.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to see what they have to bring out to the table here. Obviously, they allowed their Siphonaris to come through, those flamethrowers.
Mm-hmm.
Those will have to be the game changer for them to obviously take this into the third game, but it's exciting to see. Something that I found really fun to actually see as well is with this new, obviously, ban and pick phase coming through in this season. Seeing the Martello Torre taken off the tables, like
Yeah.
those Carcanetic pillars as we affectionately know them on Frontier, them being taken out of the equation is a really, really big deal. I know for Ecliptos, they were pretty instrumental in a lot of the strategies we had, and it's very, very broad that a lot of teams respected and used them fastly. I mean, they're one of the most extensively useful units, incredible at taking down siege artillery, really good at shooting into chokes to shut things down, can even stop cav charges as well. Any kind of utility that you want from a unit is basically there. And it's got the long range to provide that kind of
Yeah.
fire from a distance. The only factor that you have to worry about is obviously people diving
Yeah.
them. But most teams seem to be opting into banning them, actually. So it's been cool to see how they have to adjust to not having that tool at their disposal.
Yeah. Actually, in the unit ban pick stage, me not as a really professional players, I actually can't see that much of unit choice and the strategies from just banning like one unit. So really glad that Josh can, help all players and also me to understand the game better. Really appreciate Josh help. Sorry.
You're okay.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously made it really fun to watch, because when we see games like I think the original game that I quote every time I seem to cast was the game with CNC, where they banned away not only the Falconetti Gunners, but also, as I heard the Chinese mainland call them, the Golden Farmers as well, the Martellatore. I can't even remember, I'm Italian now.
Yeah.
But essentially trying to disable any kind of siege crafts from reaching the walls. It really has been interesting to see how they adapt their strategies to take into account, hey, we're going to take these units off the table.
Still, both two teams are get ready for the game 2 BOD from BOD from our Asia division and the BZZW from China's mainland server. And the BZZW, they have most audience might not be familiar with them, but they have already proved themselves in the previous battle. Really amazing defense by them.
Yeah, something they were showing to be really adept at there was really holding the lines. A lot of teams kind of crumble when their front lines are pressured as hard as BOD was pressuring. A lot of grape shots, things like that. But BZZW did a great job of not only holding out for long enough, but making sure that those reinforcements were hitting their mark with those charges that were coming through that were so important.
And we have seen so many strategies in the map Hilong field. And like BZZW, they as a defender, they just stick to the point A and B. But in previous CBLs, we see teams, they just abandon the point A and B. They just stick to the point C and destroy the champs from the attacker side. So for Josh, what kind of strategies do you prefer in the map Hilong field?
I mean, I'm personally a big fan of faking out the same way that we saw in our previous series just now, earlier today. I really like the idea of stretching your opponent thin, trying to pull them back and forth and seeing how they react. I think it's a really good way to gauge out how responsive they're going to be further down the line as well. Because if you can find out that they're slow to rotate, you can exploit that heavily when it comes to that C and final point as well, which is really important.
Yeah, it's like a really professional and play like a master. Actually, I just defend all the points I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always fun to I know everybody has to, obviously, when they come to this kind of format, has to take it really serious, really strategic. But I know a lot of people have a lot more fun when it just comes to cranking down a siege game.
Yep.
Just trying to push whatever side your team's on and just try to do your best as well.
So for the lineup from the BZZW, they are now the attacker, and you can see the unit choice. A lot of them choose the 4-4-4 lineup.
Yeah, a lot of 4-4-4 lineup actually here. And also an interesting unit coming out is those Men-at-Arms. A unit that we've seen a couple of times now. I actually can't remember if it is out of specifically BZZW, but it just may be. But I haven't really seen them be utilized too well yet. It'll be interesting to see if they can try to pull something off here, as they are one of the fan favorites, I know, from personal experience. A lot of people love that unit historically, so it's cool to see them being represented here along with the Monastic Knights, which kind of fit into that same category. A lot heavier investment here over onto this B side than we usually see as well. We see a lot of units set up here already, and not a whole lot of range units on the walls to respond. We see 2 muskets coming up on this boyer point, which are really, really good at shutting down that initial push.
Yep.
But if you're splitting between both the entrances, it's quite hard for them when it's only one per entrance to kind of slow it down, shut it down. The unit to obviously keep our eyes glued on over here is over near this middle bridge. You can see the flamethrowers are down there, the Siphonaris. set up trying to be in the middle. It's really important so you can move to react to whatever side's getting pushed. And we see a huge push here
Yeah.
mounting on the side of the breach, or at least assuming that it is, unless it's a fake here. Like it seems to be indicated that it might just be by that poleaxe swinging sides.
Yeah, really nice position of the defender Siphon.
Something else I really like to see here as well is you see with on the side of BOD, obviously both those musket players are working together well. I mean, as much damage as a musket bomb does, as much damage as caltrops can do when they're set for a while. Obviously, when you're working together, it helps a lot to actually force those opponents out of that position because nobody likes getting bombed twice by a musket player. A little bit of an unconventional setup position here for BOD on the side of A. Not quite what we'd usually expect to see. They were obviously setting up in front of the gatehouse initially with a unit of Imperial Spear Guards and also those Fortebraccio, but as you saw, they got hammered there a little bit by the Trebs and Mortars, and they are like moved into like what we'd expect to see out of those units being positioned.
Yeah, and unlike teams in the previous games, the attacker, BZZW, they just, they group up and go for one point and another point tries to seize opportunity by, keeping mobile. And now they go for the point A.
Yep. Something I love here is really smart from BOD as well as those defenders were holding up on top of the walls rather than a lot of them being downstairs, and that means that they can actually switch over straight over to this A point and fight for this breach as you see now. But unfortunately they've thrown away those Shenji already. Seems like they were caught a little bit out of position there, and they're being dove by 4 different units. They're going to meet some resistance in this choke now, though, as we see the Falcon, sorry, not the Falconetti, rather the flamethrowers are set up there, and they're guarded by those halberds. We'll have to wait and see how much damage they can actually get done. I mean, things are looking a little bit dire here for the side of BOD. As we see, like, the flamethrowers are now getting dove and annihilated as well. Both the Shenji and the Flamers are gone.
Yeah.
2 of the most important units weren't really projected that well in the end.
So you can see that the BOD tower is trying to get back to point A, but really got stopped by the BZZW's really close infantry.
It's kind of the threat of obviously bringing quite a bit of cab. As you can see there wasn't a lot of infantry to actually tie up the enemy infantry on the attacker side in time. So that cavalry's basically just gone unanswered into the front of pikes and hasn't got a lot of work done for itself.
So BZZW, they are now capturing the point A, and for the defender side, they just choose to retreat from both point A and B at the same time.
Yeah, something to note on the side of BOD obviously is that they haven't used a lot of their artillery at the very least. That's a shining beam of hope for them.
Yeah.
Still having that 11 artillery there is really important for them here, trying to hold on to the C and final point, because there's a lot of units to equalize. As you can see, they're down about 160 on the side of the tier 5 units and down almost 200 on the side of the tier 4, so they have a lot of work to make up. And hopefully those 128 difference on the green tier 2 units is going to pull through for them.
Yeah.
Seems like BZZW is actually borrowing from the books, or maybe even it's just a general strategy in the Chinese mainland of coming for this underpassage here.
Yeah.
We saw it in the ING match just before. They've opted to not actually spend their artillery here like ING has, though, which we'll have to wait and see if that's a bit of a mistake, as you see there's quite a bit of artillery that's going to be set up here for the defender side, trying to defend and repel this.
And one thing you mentioned is quite fun that a lot of China's mainland team, they prefer to go, from the downstairs, because we see a lot of Asia Division's team, they prefer to capture the supply points near the coast side first, and then go from the, by using cavalries and to go near the point C.
Yeah, something that would be really interesting to me is seeing these kind of strategies brought up against the top teams in the Asian division, because something that comes to mind is in a game where we had YYY, the team on defense, we saw this exact strategy being put into place where they have a few people up here on the ramp, the main ramp, and then a few people coming from the underground area. And YYY's response was, hey, we're just going to kill everybody on that ramp, and then double back, and now it's a 15 versus 12, so it'll be interesting to see if that strategy holds up there as well. Really harsh mortars coming in here, as well as we see a Trev also finding the mark. Almost wonder if it's better now just to call the fullback, as they've seen just how much artillery is being placed. You can count there 8 now mortars being placed now, shelling their position there. You see just how much damage it's doing as the units are just going flying, basically. Really, really tricky to hold on to this tank when they've invested that much artillery.
So for the defender side, they really needed to be cautious right now, because the high-end units gap is like over 150 now. So for BOD, they have a lot to make up, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the count hasn't actually gone down for the tier 5 units on the side of BZZW, which is quite impressive in and of itself. They're obviously holding onto the units quite well. We can actually see a unit of Huckbeteers on both sides now, actually, which is interesting and fun to see. Like I said, very cost-efficient gun unit, really accurate actually when sniping heroes, which is something that isn't common between the lower tier gun units. So a cool little unit to bring along. As we see the artillery exchanging shots, we can see BOD actually have rehearsed this point pretty well, as they've shut down a lot of the artillery that was initially set up. But there's just such a high quantity of them left that it's still going to be troublesome for them.
For BOD, they just retreat to the final base, and then now the BZZW totally capturing the supply point and go for the final base.
Unfortunately, I did forget about that unit of Huckbeteers I was just talking about. It seems like somebody left their unit a little bit behind when everybody else decided to pack up and leave. I almost would have liked to see just maybe a unit or two of those pike militia, the cheap greens, just used there to try to tie them up by a little bit more time for the team to get that unit out of there. Actually a smart call here from BOD as well, making sure that they notice that, hey, they're a little bit split, so we're going to try to pressure this flank.
Yeah.
And when they see the artillery getting placed, it looks like they're trying to back up now, making sure that they're not just getting shelled into oblivion. And even setting up a counter grape shot, which is an interesting option here as well, because obviously that other grape shot has the high ground.
Nice charge by BZZW. These 20 Canadians by the defender side just got cleared out really quickly.
Yeah, that's a really important unit to get rid of. Obviously, we saw them throw both their bomb lobs earlier, and they were doing quite a lot of damage, so stopping that unit from resupplying and getting new bombs to fire is really important for them.
Really organized charge again by the BZZW. They send shared units to step on the final base first, and send more down to clear out the enemies trying to get close. BOD's forces
Yes.
kind of scattered at this moment.
Yeah, down to only those 2 units of tier 5s, now down to 1, and only the 50 on the side of the tier 4s. It really is a desperate attempt at this point
Yep.
to try to recapture this point.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Kind of a difficult situation for BOD.
Sure, it's not the first one we found them in, but this might be the hardest one to make their way out of so far.
Yeah.
Child's play.
That looks like it might just wrap up the series here between the 2 teams. As you can see, it's just kind of a funnel of mostly just farmers at this point. Scattering of a few little tier
Yeah, and
2 green units as well, but that's all they've got.
And all the BOD have is like having heroes jump to different points. Because obviously their units are really low tiers and couldn't really make it to the point at this moment.
Yep. And obviously, even with the heroes dwindling, they've got that few as well, so they
Yeah.
seem to be leading the battle now, accepting that it's a
Whoa.
loss here for BOD.
Yeah,
And a great performance from our team of BZZW.
yeah. Nice performance by BZZW. And also great performance by BOD. So let's check the MVP from both sides. BZZW, the winning team, the MVP got like 4 kills, 1 death, and 6 assists, and almost near 1,000 scores.
Yeah, seeing it actually from their top 2 players there, and even a third one in the middle of the row also
Yeah.
got over 1,000. Huge performances from all 3 players. As it's just been a good team performance, you see that a lot of the people on the bottom of the BZZW team are people that were fulfilling very specific roles. Dual Blades players
Yeah.
usually don't place too high because they're obviously very niche. What they do is control the battlefield, backcap. They put pressure on heroes, on artillery, stuff like that. But a huge effort from the whole team, as we see a
Yeah.
lot of the units coming through that have been eliminated from that top performer were a lot of golds, a lot of purples, not a lot of the filler stuff that we saw out of BOD's roster as well.
Also great performance by BOD, the MVP. Got 4 assists and killed like 64 troops in the game. And also killed a lot of like high tier cavalries and modals, doing a lot of damage to the opponent team.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with how catastrophic the first points
Yeah.
were, with how many losses they had, to be almost even on your leadership kill to cost ratio is pretty impressive a feat. So, well played to him.
Yeah, really a nice game by BOD and the BZZW. So today we have like ING, and also BZZW got promoted to the next stage of the this time CBL. But you know, all 4 teams today, they have like done pretty amazing jobs because they are already like the top 8 in this time CBL.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to be proud of making it even this far, especially when we talk about a team like BOD, like we talked about, had a lot of
Yeah.
inexperience when it came to certain roles in their team. So them making it this far really was a good showing for them.
Yeah, and they have bring us a lot of joys, like in the field battles and also new strategies in the Harbor City.
Absolutely. I know a lot of us are going to look at them and
Yeah.
SSR favorably for giving
Yeah.
us those field battles, as they're pretty rare to see.
So really teams by those 4 teams, and I believe this is kind of all for today. So thank you, Josh, and thank you all your audience, and yeah. Tomorrow will be the territory wars, and on Sunday we will still have the CBL streams. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've had a blast.
Yeah, so let's see you guys in Sunday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Josh.